Welcome back to another video. My name is John, and this is an introduction series on how to use HaxeFlixel. So last time we ended up with, let me just show you, creating the Hello World project from the HaxeFlixel website. So I'll be honest, it's not much. It just shows text rendering on the screen. It's not a game, and it's kind of boring. Like, really kind of boring. Like, imagine paying like $60 for text on a screen that tells you hello world. Yeah. Oh, and this is the game launching in. Wow, that was a fail. Cool. Okay, in any case. So this is the game launching in HTML5 mode. So you can see here it's hello world, plain simple text. Okay, so before we start, just want to change some things. One of which is setting this to hash link, and the other one is making the viewable screen just a bit bigger, because like 640 by 480 is very tiny, and after a while you kind of get used to it. So let's change it to 1080 by 720. We'll leave it, let's make it 120 FPS, because why not? Like, it's not like we're pushing AAA graphics, full Vulkan backend rendering, bare metal all the way. Background still has the black screen. Yes, we want hardware acceleration, and we don't really care about VSync, although if you do find any tearing, maybe consider putting on VSync. Cool. So with that, let's start by implementing the player. So any game has a main character or the playable character, or maybe even a few playable characters. So we'll start off by creating a file called player.hx, the hx being the hex file type. So we'll call this class player extends flx type. How annoying is it when it's caching? So we can just create it. So you'll see down here it. Okay, cool. Now, so import HaxeFlixel. Cool. So we'll start off by saying we want a static inline variable called movement speed, and it is of type float, and we'll just put it as 350. By all means, if you're not happy with this, tweak it and try to implement it in a way that feels more natural. From testing, I have discovered 350 works actually quite well, and that's our annoying neighbors. Sorry about that. So before I go any further, so the idea that I had was creating a top-down shooter type RPG thing, and so I would prefer if it has a bit more actiony, fast movement, bullet hell type implementation. So I went with 350. This can be changed to like 600 to really test the player skills. That would actually be quite interesting watching someone play it on that much. And just see. Oh, cool. So it also has the functions built in. So this is kind of like the player constructor. We want the x position as a float, and we have a default of 0. So if you don't implement, so if you don't, when you create the player, you don't specifically give it an x and y position, it'll automatically go and divert to being at 0, which is cool. And like 0 is a good spot for it to be. So we call the parent class that we extended constructor using the x and y that we gave it. So next up is we want to just have some very basic programmer art because I haven't implemented any sprite sheets yet. I'm really horrible at planning ahead. In any case, so we can use make graphic. So the height we'll put as 20, the width we'll put as 20, and then the color. I'm gonna go with an orange one because it's my favorite color, and also it just stands out nicely with the background and everything. So, and then also because of the way they implemented movement speed in this game is very physics-based, so you use things like velocity to say how quickly you move from one spot to another. But the issue with that is velocity like just keeps going. So if you were to say like velocity in the X direction, the player would just keep moving the moment you press the key and never stop. Actually, I can show it. So update. Override. Funny, thank you. And then let's just create a private function that will handle movement for this character alone. So that's why we make it private. So there's no reason for it to be used by anyone else. Now, before we go on, the movement script, pretty much just stole from the examples they gave us because one, it's pretty good and it fits our game's needs as a top-down shooter pretty well because you just need to move up, down, left, and right. And you can also move from diagonally. And the way they implemented it on the tutorial, they did it in such a way that if you move diagonally, you'll move in the exact same speed as you would up and down, which usually if a player went diagonally because of trigonometry, they would end up just moving faster if not implemented in a way such as this. So we'll have a few variables for up, which is type bool. So it can either be true or false. We'll initialize it as false, and then we can just go copy this 4 times. So it's up, down, left, and right. And now to test if a player, so we want to test if the player like presses an W key to move up, S to move down, A to move left, or D to move right. And so we go up equals, because it's a boolean, so xg. So if when the recommendations pop up, you just press either tab or enter and it'll just auto import it as you saw over here. So you can say HaxeFlixel keys to specify that you want to work with the key specifically. Any pressed. So if the key is pressed, then set the up variable to equal, or more specifically, we want the W key. Now you can give this a range of keys. You can also say like the up arrow, and that'll check if the up arrow is pressed, it'll move up. If the W key is pressed, it'll also move up. But from my perspective, I just prefer using WASD as someone that plays games. I can't remember the last time I went, oh yeah, I need to move the up, use the up arrow, the arrow keys to move my character. Just in modern games, you just don't do it. So down, left, and right. And then we have to set them equal to the variable. So it's down, left, if I can type, right. Cool. So, okay. So if the player character or if the player presses W, it'll set the up variable as true. If it presses S, it'll set down, and so forth and so on. So with that, we can check which way the player should move. But also, we don't want the character to So let's say the player like panics or tries to press both up and down at the same time. How would we handle it? How would we say, okay, shall we just use the last key that they pressed? Shall we like vibrate it almost between up and down? Or more alternatively, we can say if up and down. So if both are true, we just want to say up equals down equals, if I can, thank you, false. So we just say if up and down are pressed at the same time, just don't do anything. We don't want to like throw it over to luck or chance or anything and have the player like accidentally walk into someone because they are panicking. So if up and down is pressed at the same time, don't move either. But we also have left and right, so we do the same thing for left and right. So it's left and right. So left equals right equals false. So the player can, if they panic, they can still, if they like panic and push W, A, and S at the same time, they won't move up and down, they'll just move left as if up and down aren't pressed at all. So with that out of the way, we also want, now we can check how the player should move. So this part is, I understand it kind of badly because I'm not quite used to how they do the angles in game, but in the, so I'll have the link below. In the actual tutorial, they go into quite a detailed explanation as to why they used it this way. And I can sort of like explain it. So if up or down or left or right, so if any movement keys are pressed, then we want to go through the movements. So we create a new angle of type float equals 0. So it'll start off, if I understand this correctly, just being 0. So just move normally, or since it's the x-axis, I guess 0 is over here. See, this is the part that kind of gets me, is because okay, but let's just keep going. So if up, so if the up key is pressed, then new angle is equal to minus 90 degrees. See, this is the part that gets me because I'm not very aware of how the angles work in the game specifically. So I just went with what they have rather than trying to implement it myself. So if up and left is pressed, new angle minus equals 45 degrees. Else if right is pressed, new angle plus equals 45 degrees. So let's say we press the up key, so minus 90 is up, and we press the left key, we want to move minus 90 to a bit like this. If right is pressed, and rather we move it this way so that the player moves at a 45-degree angle. Next up is down. So else if down is pressed, well, at least now I know how the angles work, if I'm not mistaken. Which is kind of weird, like why would you start at minus 90 over here? It's just one of those things that I don't quite understand, but the rest of the engine is really easy to use. Like, you can read through all this code and be like, okay, yeah, I can sort of understand this generates a square, this calls the parent constructor, this updates it at, this is a function that runs at each update. Like, you have your booleans, you check if a key is pressed, so if it is, you put it as true. Like, none of this, you would go, why on earth did they do this? Like, the only part where you might struggle is at this part. And that's only because I am horrible at explaining. So next up is down, so 90 degrees, 180 from up. If left is pressed, if up, if down and left is pressed, new angle plus equals 45. Else if, and by the way, like if you are very pedantic like myself, you would start to cringe at the fact that I did that. Like, why did I go first down, then this? But if I press Control S, it like Visual Studio Code would just indent it, so I can do whatever I want. In the end, it will follow their syntax rules and not mine. So either way, like you can mess up your syntax horribly, and then you press Control S and like goes through and makes it pretty, and you're like, ah, all my work for nothing. And then if we press right, we move the new angle to minus equal 45. Cool. And then if we only, else if we only press left, then the new angle is equal to 180 degrees. Else if we only press right, new angle equals 0. Okay, yeah, so it starts at over here and then goes downwards 90, 180, and then 270 or minus 90. At least it's not that important. It's one of those things that once you write it once, it's over. So the reason we specifically went with angular degree with angles rather than just saying if up is pressed set velocity dot x equal to movement speed, if down is pressed, no, if up is pressed, put velocity dot y equals to movement speed. If down is pressed, put it as negative movement speed. But then you end up moving faster in the diagonals than you should. So the way they got around it is by using, well, angles, as you saw now. So we say the velocity of the character, we set it as movement speed. So we put the x velocity as movement speed and the y velocity as 0. Because the way they did it is they don't really move the character in the y, like they just rotate it and say move forward, rather than saying okay, move up, move down, move left. It just rotates into the right spot and then moves it forward or backwards. No, but even if you push backwards, like rotate it, but you will see that it's not the sprite that gets rotated, it's only the ID of the character. So, and then we rotate. So after setting the forward motion, the right momentum on the x-axis, we say rotate the sprite point dot weak Now you might be wondering what is the let me just get back here. Import. Okay, cool. Of course. So you might be wondering, so it rotates around the 0, 0 point. And from what I understand is it, so this is the part that I find kind of weird, is the fact that it released to the pool when passed into the so they like take it from the pool, use it in the function, and release it back. But I'm not quite sure as to why there is a pool like at all. So we just say we rotate it around the 0, 0 point of the sprite in a certain angle. So that should be mostly our player class. Or let me just add this in. So we just want the drag.x equals drag.y equals 1600. I believe that's what they used in the tutorial. Although I want to show you what happens if you don't use the drags. Let me just comment that out. By the way, if you want to automatically comment it out or uncomment it on Windows and Linux, you press Control/. So it comments it. If it's uncommented, it like just swaps it from commented state to uncommented state. So we'll come back to that, but first we want to initialize the player. So in our so this is like the main play state. So you can think of a state as kind of like a screen, what you can see on the screen at the moment. So let's say you have your main menu, that would be a state. You have your first level, that would be a state. You have your 15,000 level on your, or even your dev screen. Even your dev screen would be a Flixel state. So in our main play state, we create a private variable, since it will only be used inside this state. Private variable underscore player of type player. And as you saw when I pressed Control S, it like made a space to ensure that it's nice and pretty. So one thing that also confused me from their tutorial is in the example they gave us with the hello world, they put it underneath super.create, but in the tutorial itself, it went above super.create. So I don't really think it matters, but since the tutorial is a bit further beyond than just simple hello world, I just tend to put it before the super.create. Although I haven't tested it, so maybe it works both times. To be tested. So we first set player equal to a new instance of our player class, and we'll put it at x50, y50. So this is just for testing purposes, making sure our base systems like player movements, shooting, things like that work. And then later we'll get into the artsy part of it by creating like map tiles, sprites, and then we'll use, I can't remember the name of the software, but we'll use Ogmo 3, I think, to create the maps and then import it and generate it. So we don't have an in-game HaxeFlixel doesn't have a level editor built into it, but it has ability to use Ogmo and I believe Tiled as well. Although I've only ever used Tiled like once in my life for a game jam, and that game jam went horribly wrong. Like it was absolutely horrible. So now that we have player, so if we run this now, like I just want to show you. So first off, we compile it, which takes like a few seconds, but I've seen compilations take a lot longer. Like if you know the Rust programming language, like one of the things in that programming language is when you compile something, you have to wait up like a minute. So you see, even though we added the player to our scene, it's not like showing up. It should be around here somewhere, and yet it isn't. And you should, if you ever like add something and you wonder why isn't it there, one of the reasons for that is you might have forgotten to specifically call the function to add it into the scene so that you can actually see it. So if we recompile after adding it, sorry, just gets a bit dry. I never knew YouTubers had to talk nearly this much. Maybe it's just me. Anyways, so now you can see the players here. Now if I were to press D, I'm such an idiot. Okay, wait. We forgot to add the movement to our update function. So we created the entire function, but because HaxeFlixel doesn't know about it, like HaxeFlixel knows about the update function, it knows about the new function, but it doesn't know about our function. So we have to specifically check at each frame of our game whether or not the player is pressing any buttons. So I just forgot to add that. Ugh. Okay, it should work now. Oh, that was such a blind moment. No offense to blind people, though. Okay, so now if I press, so one hand, press D, and you can see like it just keeps moving into infinity. I can bring it back by pressing A, I think. Yep, there it goes. But you can see if I press it, it just keeps going, whether it just has no stopping it. So the way you would have to stop it is you have to specifically give it a drag. So you can say, now if we add the drag in both the X and Y directions, we recompile again. 3 compilations in one, no. Yeah, it's like 3-4 compilations in one video. Not too bad. Wait for it. Cool. Now, if you see I press it, it just moves. But it also stops. So now you can see we have quite fluid movement. We can move it horizontally without moving faster than we would have otherwise. We can move up, down, left, right, and diagonally in all 4 diagonals. Cool. So that is player movement tutorial 1 officially. Until next time, thank you for watching.